For hundreds of years, ships of all kinds have sailed across the seas and oceans, and unfortunately, there have been many accidents and shipwrecks. Some of these disasters have even been made into films, with the most famous being the Titanic. But which shipwrecks were the largest in terms of the size of the ship and the number of victims? In this ranking, we answer this question by presenting the biggest maritime disasters. Lusitania. The ranking begins with a British passenger liner that was torpedoed by the German submarine U-20 on May 7, 1915, in a zone designated by the Kaiser government as a zone of submarine warfare. The ship, sailing with a painted-over name and not raising any flag above it, sank in 18 minutes, 13 kilometers from the coast of Ireland. 1198 people died out of 1959 who were on board. The destruction of this ship turned the public opinion of many countries against Germany and contributed to the entry of the United States into the First World War 2 years later. 10. Fort Stykin. The single-screw steamer had a capacity of 7,142 register tons, a length of 132 meters, a beam of 17 meters, and a maximum speed of 11 knots. On April 12, 1944, a steamship with explosives with a total mass of more than 1,500 tons stood up for unloading at the pier of the Port of Bombay. There were other cargoes on board: 8,700 tons of cotton, 128 ingots of gold, sulfur, wood, engine oil, etc. The ship was loaded in violation of safety regulations. At about 2 p.m., a fire broke out on board, and no actions contributed to its elimination. At 1606, there was an explosion that generated a tidal wave of such force that the Jalampada ship, with a displacement of almost 4,000 tons, ended up on the roof of a 17-meter warehouse. After 34 minutes, there was a second explosion. Burning cotton scattered within a radius of 900 meters from the epicenter and set fire to everything: ships, warehouses, houses. A strong wind from the sea drove a wall of fire to the city. The fires were extinguished only after 2 weeks. It took about 7 months to restore the port. Official statistics announced 1,376 deaths, 2,408 people were admitted to hospitals. The fire destroyed 55,000 tons of grain, thousands of tons of seeds, oil, a huge amount of military equipment, and almost 1 square mile of city blocks. 6,000 firms went bankrupt, 50,000 people lost their jobs. Many small and 4 large ships, dozens of cars were destroyed. 9. Titanic. It was with this ship that the most famous disaster on the water occurred. The British White Star Line steamer was the second of 3 Olympic-class twin steamers and the largest passenger liner in the world at the time of construction. On its maiden voyage on April 14, 1912, it collided with an iceberg and sank 2 hours and 40 minutes later. There were 2,224 people on board. Of these, 711 people were saved, and 1,513 died. The Titanic disaster became legendary, and several feature films were shot based on its plot. 8. Mont Blanc and Imo. In the harbor of the Canadian city of Halifax on December 6, 1917, the French military cargo ship Mont Blanc, which was fully loaded with one explosive, TNT, pyroxylin, and picric acid, collided with the Norwegian ship Imo. As a result of the strongest explosion, the port and a significant part of the city were completely destroyed. About 2,000 people died as a result of an explosion under the rubble of buildings and because of the fires that arose after the explosion. Approximately 9,000 people were injured, and 400 people lost their sight. The explosion in Halifax is one of the strongest explosions arranged by mankind, and this explosion is considered the most powerful explosion of the pre-nuclear era. 7. Provence. This French auxiliary cruiser served as a flagship and participated in the neutralization of the Greek fleet. She sank in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Greece on February 26, 1916, after a torpedo attack by the German submarine U-35. Of the 4,000 people on board, 3,130 died, and 870 escaped. 6. General Steuben. After 1944, This German passenger ocean liner was converted into a floating hospital and participated in the evacuation of mostly wounded soldiers and refugees from East Prussia from the advancing Red Army. The liner left the port of Pillau on February 9, 1945, and headed for Kiel. There were more than 4,000 people on board: wounded military personnel, soldiers, refugees, medical staff, and crew members. On the night of February 10 at 0:55, the Soviet submarine S-13 torpedoed the liner with 2 torpedoes. The ship sank 15 minutes later, killing 3,608 and saving 659 people. When the liner was torpedoed, the submarine commander was convinced that in front of him was not a passenger liner, but a military cruiser. 5. Doña Paz and Vector. The passenger ferry Doña Paz, registered in the Philippines, sank on December 20, 1987, at about 10 p.m. near the island of Marinduque after a collision with the tanker Vector. Approximately 4,375 people died in the process, making this the largest maritime disaster in peacetime. 4. Armenia. This passenger cargo ship of the Adzaria type was built at the Baltic shipyard in Leningrad in 1928, and on November 7, 1941, it was sunk by German aircraft near the Crimean coast. The death toll was, according to various estimates, from 3,000 to 4,500 people. On the ship were several thousand wounded soldiers and evacuated citizens, including the staff of 23 military and civilian hospitals, the leadership of the pioneer camp, and part of the party leadership of the Crimea. The loading of the evacuees was in a hurry, and their exact number is not known. There is a version that the cause of this maritime disaster was the criminal mistakes of the Black Sea Fleet Command. The crowded motor ship, instead of making the transition to the Caucasian, was sent by the command to Yalta. 3. Goya. At first, it was used as a conditional target for training the crews of German submarines. Later, the ship took part in the evacuation of people by sea from the advancing Red Army. It was armed with cannons. This ship managed to make 4 campaigns, in which 19,785 people were evacuated. On the night of April 16, 1945, making the 5th campaign, it was torpedoed by the Soviet submarine L-3, after which the Goya sank in the Baltic Sea. More than 6,900 people died in the disaster. 2. Cap Arkona and Tilbek. On May 3, 1945, a tragedy occurred in the Baltic Sea, the victims of which were approximately 8,000 people. The German liner, Cap Arkona, and the cargo ship, Tilbek, transporting prisoners from the evacuating concentration camps, were fired upon by British aircraft. As a result, more than 5,000 people died on the Cap Arkon, and about 2,800 on the Tilbek. According to one version, this raid was a mistake on the part of the British Air Force, who believed that German troops were on the ships. According to another, the pilots were ordered to destroy everything enemy ships in the area. 1. Wilhelm Gustlow. The biggest disaster on the water occurred with this German passenger liner, which since 1940 has been converted into a floating hospital. During the Second World War, it was used as an infirmary, a hostel for the 2nd Training Brigade of submariners. The death of the ship, torpedoed on January 30, 1945, by the Soviet submarine S-13 under the command of A.I. Marinescu, is considered the largest disaster in maritime history. According to some historians, real losses could be more than 9,000 people. At 21:16, the first torpedo hit the bow of the ship. Later the second blew up the empty pool where the women of the Naval Auxiliary Battalion were, and the last one hit the engine room. With the joint efforts of the crew and passengers, some lifeboats were launched, and yet there were many people in the icy water. From the strong roll of the ship, an anti-aircraft gun came off the deck and crushed one of the boats full of people. About an hour after the attack, the Wilhelm Gustlow completely sank.